The air was heavy with the scent of fresh varnish and those overpriced vanilla candles Clara always insisted on buying. I leaned back on the couch, nursing my second glass of bourbon, trying to process what had just gone down. My best friend Jake had left about an hour ago, grinning like some kind of Cheshire cat after pitching his latest harebrained idea, a swapping party. And now Jake was always the thrill seeker in our group, dragging me into all sorts of ridiculous plans since college. So the idea itself wasn't what threw me. No, it was Clara's reaction that hit me like a sucker punch. My wife proper Clara lit up like a kid on Christmas morning. "I think Jake might be onto something," she said, leaning casually in the doorway, her voice dripping with his faux innocence. I glanced up, unsure if she was joking. "Onto what?" "Destroying marriages," I chuckled, though there was no humour in it. The very idea twisted something deep in my gut. Clara sauntered over, her silk robe swaying with every step. She perched herself on the arm of the couch, her fingers casually trailing across my chest. "It's not like that," she said, her tone smooth, persuasive. "It's just a party. Something new to try. You know I've always been curious about." She trailed off, testing the waters, having two men at once. Her words hit me like a freight train. I blinked, certain I hadn't heard her right. "You're joking," I said, sitting up straighter. She shook her head, her eyes gleaming with a mix of excitement and defiance. "It's not cheating if it's consensual," she reasoned, her lips curling into a smile that made my blood boil. "It's just for fun. You don't even have to come if you don't want to." That last part stung the most, the way she brushed me off like I was just some side character in her little fantasy. My pulse quickened, but I swallowed the anger, letting the bourbon burn its way down, as if it could somehow numb the ache spreading in my chest. "Do what you want," I said finally, my voice colder than I'd intended. Her expression faltered for a moment before she leaned in and kissed my cheek. "Thank you for being so understanding," she whispered, as though I'd just given her my blessing. The night of the party came too fast. Clara spent hours getting ready, emerging from our bedroom in a tight black dress that left nothing to the imagination. She looked stunning, sure, but all I felt was an aching disconnect. "I'll be back late," she said, grabbing her clutch. She didn't wait for a response. She didn't even look back as she walked out the door. I watched her go, the click of her heels echoing down the hallway. Something inside me snapped. The bourbon, the lies, the months of feeling like a stranger in my own home, they all boiled over into a rage I could no longer contain. The scene at the party was chaos. I burst through the door, the roar of a chainsaw in my hands drowning out the pounding bass of their music. For a split second, everyone froze, their faces wide-eyed with shock as they tried to process what they were seeing. Me, standing there, fury etched into every line of my face. Clara was against the headboard, clutching a sheet to her chest, while three men scattered around the room like deer caught in headlights. One dove to the side, another froze in place, and the third, a muscle-bound idiot with too much confidence, took a step forward, his hands raised like he was about to negotiate. "What, man?" he said, his voice annoyingly calm. "Let's all just..." The chainsaw roared louder as I swung it, sending sparks flying as it tore through a bedside lamp. The crash shattered whatever courage they had left. "You said it wasn't cheating," I growled, my voice barely audible over the growl of the machine. "Just a party, right?" "Wait, please," Clara stammered, tears streaming down her face. "It's not what it looks like." "Oh, really?" I snarled, glancing at the men. "So, what is it then? A book club? A prayer circle?" The musclehead lunged, trying to grab the chainsaw. Big mistake. I pivoted, the blade swinging just inches from his face. He yelped, stumbling backward into the dresser. The second guy made his move next, rushing me from behind. I slammed the butt of the chainsaw into his gut, knocking the wind out of him. He crumpled to the floor, gasping like a fish out of water. "Stop this!" Clara shrieked, her voice cracking. But her words only fanned the flames inside me. The wiry guy grabbed a chair and charged, but I ducked, sending his swing into the wall. As he raised the chair for another go, I kicked him square in the chest, sending him toppling onto the bed, where Clara shrank away. The muscle head recovered and came at me again. This time, I didn't hold back. The chainsaw roared as I swung low, tearing through the bed frame. Wood and fabric splintered everywhere, and the guy lost his balance. I drove my shoulder into him, slamming him into the wall so hard, a painting fell and shattered at our feet. "Get out!" I barked, my voice like thunder. The wiry guy bolted first, tripping over the broken chair on his way out. The muscle-bound idiot hesitated, glaring like he was weighing his chances. I revved the chainsaw, and, with a whimper, he staggered out, clutching his ribs. That left the last guy, still wheezing on the floor. I stepped closer, the tip of the chainsaw hovering near his face. "Go," I spat. He scrambled out the door, on all fours, like a whipped dog. Then it was just me and Clara. She sat trembling on the bed, her perfect little world reduced to rubble. "You don't understand," she sobbed. "I didn't mean for—" "Shut up," I snapped, my voice as sharp as the blade in my hands. "What happens next depends on you. Revenge, redemption, or something else entirely. But one thing's for sure, after this night, everything changes. You wanted this, you asked for this, don't you dare play the victim now." My voice was sharp, cutting through the air like the hum of the chainsaw in my hands. She flinched, tears streaming down her face, her sobs choking in her throat. For a fleeting second, guilt tugged at me, but it was no match for the tidal wave of rage and betrayal coursing through my veins. I stepped closer, looming over her, the chainsaw humming. A visceral reminder of how far we'd fallen, how much had been shattered between us. "You think this is over?" I said, my voice low, menacing. "It's not even close." Her sobs turned into gasps as I turned and stormed out, leaving her cowering on the bed that was now as broken as our marriage. The party outside was silent, the guests frozen like statues as I stomped through the house, the roar of the chainsaw still echoing in my wake. Their wide-eyed stares followed me, but no one dared move, much less speak. By the time I reached my car, my hands were steady, my mind eerily calm. The chainsaw sat in the passenger seat, its blade streaked with scratches, a silent passenger to the storm raging inside me. The drive home was a blur, my knuckles bone white as I gripped the steering wheel tighter than I ever had before. Clara's tear-streaked face flashed in my mind, her sobs echoing like a broken record I couldn't turn off. The bourbon still burned in my veins, but the anger was a wildfire, consuming everything. When I finally pulled into the driveway, the house stood dark and silent, the kind of silence that presses against your skull. Inside, the stillness was oppressive, almost mocking. I poured myself another bourbon, the glass trembling slightly in my grip as the adrenaline began to fade. But the fury didn't. Clara thought tonight was the worst thing I could do to her. She had no idea. I sat at the kitchen counter, staring at her laptop. It sat there so innocently, like it wasn't about to unleash hell. Clara had always been careless with passwords, same ones for everything. In minutes, I was inside her email, her social media, her private photo folders. It was all there, every damning detail. Selfies, flirtatious exchanges, photos she'd sent to strangers hiding behind the excuse of exploring boundaries. The texts with Jake outlining every sick detail of the swapping party. Every word, every image was another knife to the chest, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. I fed on the pain like it was fuel, cataloguing it all with a grim sense of purpose. By the time I leaned back in my chair, the sun was beginning to rise. Exhaustion pulled at me, but satisfaction burned hotter. The skeletons in her closet weren't just coming out, they were about to dance in the spotlight. Clara came home a few hours later, looking like a ghost. Her makeup was smeared, her eyes bloodshot, and she reeked of sweat and desperation. She froze the moment she saw me sitting at the dining table, her laptop open in front of me. "We need to talk," she said weakly, her voice cracking. "Oh, we're past talking," I replied, my tone icy as I gestured to the chair across from me. "Sit." She hesitated but obeyed, moving slowly like a cornered animal. Her eyes darted to the laptop, then back to me. The realization hit her like a freight train. What are you doing?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Showing the world who you really are." Her blood drained from her face as I turned the laptop toward her. The screen displayed a draft email, carefully composed with dozens of recipients. Her family, her co-workers, her boss, even Jake's wife. Attached were screenshots of her texts, explicit photos, and a link to a folder containing everything I'd uncovered. "You wouldn't," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Why wouldn't I?" I countered, my voice calm, almost conversational. "You didn't think twice about what you were doing last night, about what you've been doing for God knows how long, so why should I think twice about this?" Her hands flew to her mouth, a choked sob escaping her lips. "Please," she begged. "I'll do anything, just don't." I leaned forward, pinning her with my gaze. "Anything, like how you did anything to respect this marriage? Like how you did anything to think about me while you were off with 3 strangers?" Her sobs grew louder, her shoulders shaking uncontrollably, but I didn't stop. The anger surged through me like a drug, numbing any trace of mercy. "This is just the beginning," I said, my voice razor sharp. "You think you've lost control now? Wait until your boss sees this, your parents, everyone who ever thought you were worth a damn." Her sobs turned to hysteria, her face crumpling under the weight of it all. For a moment, I paused, staring at her, a broken shell of the woman I once loved. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. "Here's the deal," I said finally, my tone cutting. "I won't send this. Not yet. But you're leaving today. Pack your things, get out. And don't you dare breathe a word to anyone. Not about me, not about what happened. If you even think about playing the victim, this email goes out to everyone." Her eyes widened in horror. "Where am I supposed to go?" "I don't care," I snapped, standing up and towering over her. "That's not my problem anymore. You wanted your freedom? Congratulations. Now live with it." She didn't argue, didn't fight. She just nodded, her face crumpling as she shuffled toward the bedroom to pack. By the end of the day, she was gone. I stood at the window, watching her car disappear down the street, my chest heaving with exhaustion and triumph. But even then, it wasn't enough. The folder still sat on my laptop, a loaded weapon, waiting for the right moment. The world deserved to know the truth about Clara, about Jake, about all of them. And when the time came, I wouldn't hesitate to pull the trigger. The house was quiet again, not the suffocating silence of betrayal, but the stillness of a battlefield after the enemy retreats. And for the first time in months, I could finally breathe. I sat in the living room, the faint hum of the laptop beside me. Clara's shadow was gone, but her ghost lingered in every corner of the house. The scent of her perfume was still embedded in the couch cushions, every memory a whisper that echoed in the walls. I sipped my bourbon, staring at the unsent email draft on the screen. The cursor blinked, taunting me like a silent dare. Destroy her completely. I wanted to. God, did I want to. But not yet. No, there were more players in this little drama, and they deserved their reckoning too. Jake was first, my best friend, the guy I trusted like a brother, the same guy who had set this entire chain of events into motion. He probably thought he was untouchable, sitting in his overpriced house with his picture-perfect family, but I knew his secrets now. Clara, ever the chatterbox in her messages, had spilled every detail. Jake's swapping parties were just the tip of the iceberg. There were women, escorts, mistresses, and even unpaid debts to some very dangerous people. I picked up my phone and dialed. "Hey man," Jake answered, his voice annoyingly cheerful. Didn't expect to hear from you so soon. You good? Better than ever, I said, my tone colder than ice. We need to talk. Come by the house. Jake hesitated, sensing the shift. Yeah, sure. Everything okay? Just get here, I snapped, hanging up, before he could press further. It didn't take long for Jake to show up. He strolled in like he owned the place, dressed in a polo and jeans, his grin wide and oblivious. What's up? He asked, dropping onto my couch like we were still old pals. I didn't bother with pleasantries. I tossed a folder onto the coffee table in front of him. What's this? He asked, frowning as he picked it up. Up and it. Jake flipped through the pages, his expression morphing from confusion to sheer panic. Photos of him with women who weren't his wife, texts, transcripts of his sleazy conversations, even receipts from his very expensive appointments. Where the hell did you get this? He demanded, his face pale. Doesn't matter, I said, leaning forward. What matters is what I'm going to do with it. Come on, man, he stammered, setting the folder down like it was a ticking bomb. We're friends. You're not seriously. Friends, I laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. You think what you did to me counts as friendship? You set up that party, knowing exactly what would happen. You wanted to humiliate me. You thought it'd be fun to throw my wife into the deep end and see if I'd sink. Jake opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off. You're going to do exactly what I say, or this goes to your wife, your boss, everyone. I gestured toward the folder. And don't think about calling my bluff. I'll burn every bridge in your life just to watch you drown. What do you want? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. First, you're going to tell me everything, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Every little scheme, every lie you've told, every woman you've screwed, literally or figuratively. And when you're done, you're going to help me make sure Clara and everyone like her pays. Jake's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him. All right, he muttered, defeated. All right. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of controlled chaos. Jake folded like a house of cards, spilling secrets faster than I could process them. He gave me names, dates, connections, everything I needed to unravel the web of lies that had entangled my life. Clara, she didn't contact me, not that I expected her to. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard she was holed up in some run-down motel across town, barely keeping it together. Good, let her rot. But I wasn't done. Not with Clara, not with Jake, not with anyone who thought they could walk all over me and get away with it. Jake's information opened doors I hadn't even considered. I uncovered other men Clara had entertained, some of them mutual acquaintances. One was a client of mine, a smug entrepreneur who thought his money made him untouchable. I leaked his involvement to a gossip site and watched his carefully crafted reputation crumble in real time. For every person who had a hand in my downfall, I returned the favor tenfold. Anonymous tips, leaked emails, a few well-timed confrontations in public places. I became a ghost in their lives, an unseen force pulling the strings of their undoing. And then there was Clara. When I finally reached out, it wasn't with a message of reconciliation or forgiveness. It was a simple text. I hope you're ready to beg. Her response came quickly. What do you want? Please, just tell me what to do. I sent her the address of a dingy diner on the outskirts of town, far from the prying eyes of anyone she might turn to for help. When she walked in, she looked like she'd aged a decade. Her clothes were wrinkled, her makeup non-existent, her once pristine nails bitten down to the quick. She spotted me in the corner booth and approached cautiously, like a dog expecting to be kicked. Sit, I said, not bothering with a greeting. She obeyed, her eyes darting around the room. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice trembling. I leaned back in my seat, taking my time before answering. I want you to understand what it feels like to lose everything. To know that every step you take, every move you make is at my mercy. Her lip trembled. I already do. No, I said, my voice cold. Not yet, but you will. She sat there, shrinking under the weight of my silence. The harsh fluorescent lights of the diner cast a sickly glow over her pale face, highlighting every crack in the once impenetrable mask she wore. I slid an envelope across the table. Open it. Her trembling hands reached for the envelope, tearing it open. With slow, fumbling movements, Clara pulled the documents from the envelope. They were neatly printed and organized. Divorce papers. Her breath hitched. Hugh, you want a divorce? I smirked, savoring the cruel satisfaction welling up in my chest. Oh, it's not just a divorce. Read the terms carefully, Clara. Every single one. She flipped through the pages, her eyes widening with every clause. My lawyer had been thorough. Brutal, even. She would walk away with nothing. No alimony, no claim to the house, no access to my savings or retirement funds. And the piece de resistance? A non-disclosure agreement that would legally bar her from ever speaking about me, our marriage, or anything that had happened. You can't do this, she whispered, her voice cracking. This isn't fair. I laughed, low and bitter. Fair? You're worried about fair now? Where was fairness when you decided my loyalty was worth less than a room full of strangers? Where was fairness when you laughed with Jake about humiliating me? Her eyes filled with tears, her lower lip trembling. I'll have nothing, she choked out. That's the idea, I said sharply. You earned nothing. She clutched the papers like a lifeline, her mind visibly scrambling for a way out. Please, she begged. I'll do anything. Just don't do this. I made a mistake. I know I did, but I'll fix it. I'll do whatever it takes. I leaned forward, narrowing my eyes at her. You can't fix this, Clara. You broke something that can't be put back together, and now you're going to live with the consequences. Her tears spilled over, and she buried her face in her hands, her body shaking with sobs. I watched her crumble, and for a moment, a fleeting, treacherous moment, I felt a twinge of something close to pity, but I smothered it. She didn't deserve my pity, not after what she'd done. I let her cry, sitting in silence until she finally lifted her head, her face a blotchy mess. What happens if I don't sign? She asked weakly. I slid my phone across the table. On the screen was the email draft I'd shown her before, the one with all the attachments and recipients, the damning evidence ready to go with the press of a button. If you don't sign, I said evenly, this goes out to everyone, your parents, your friends, your boss, everyone who ever thought you were a decent human being. And when they're done judging you, I'll make sure you never get a job, a relationship, or a shred of respect again. Your choice. Her face crumpled, and for a long moment she just stared at the papers. Finally, with trembling hands, she picked up the pen I'd left on the table and signed her name on every dotted line. Each stroke of the pen felt like a nail in the coffin of the life we'd built together. When she was done, she pushed the papers back toward me, her eyes hollow. Is that it? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. For now, I said, standing and gathering the documents. But don't think for a second that I'll forget what you did. If I so much as hear your name again, Clara, I'll make good on every threat I've made. She nodded, her shoulders slumping in defeat. Without another word, I walked out of the diner, the papers tucked under my arm. I didn't look back. The weeks that followed were a strange mix of peace and destruction. Clara disappeared from my life entirely, leaving a gaping hole that I was slowly learning to fill. Jake's fall was even more spectacular. Once I'd squeezed every useful bit of information out of him, I sent his dirt to his wife, his boss, and every relevant party I could think of. His world imploded overnight. Divorce papers, a lost job, and even a few physical threats from the unsavory types he owed money to. Jake wasn't just ruined, he was erased. And me, I rebuilt. Slowly, steadily, I took back the pieces of myself that had been stolen. The house felt lighter without Clara's presence, her ghost fading with each passing day. My friends the real ones, rallied around me, offering support in their own awkward, well-meaning ways. And for the first time in years, I felt free.